Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a pretty pivotal moment, I think, in history.
Okay.
The mass migration to Israel right after its founding
Yeah.
will uncover how one family's story
Right.
intertwines with this huge challenge, right? Housing a nation practically overnight.
And we're going beyond just the historical facts here.
Yeah.
We're using the Liat Show, which is a Substack newsletter by Liat Portal,
Okay.
to explore the human impact of those early urban planning decisions.
I see.
Choices that still resonate even today, right?
Yeah, it's 1948. Israel, a brand new nation, is facing this incredible challenge.
Right.
Nearly 1 million immigrants arriving,
Wow.
all seeking a new life.
Yeah.
Imagine that task of creating a country from scratch
I know.
with limited resources and trying to find housing for such a huge influx of people.
Yeah. Where do you even begin?
Where do you even begin?
Right.
And Liat's newsletter reveals the initial solution, these transit camps called ma'abaro, and they were rudimentary, often just tents, temporary shelters.
Can you picture arriving in a new land with only like the possessions you could carry,
Right.
facing this uncertain future?
Yeah, and it's a stark contrast to the life Liat's father's family left behind.
Right.
They were middle class in Morocco
Wow.
and suddenly thrust into this unfamiliar, challenging environment.
What's fascinating is that
Yeah.
the Ma'abarouts were a specifically Israeli response.
Okay.
But this whole idea of using temporary housing to address displacement,
Right?
it wasn't unique.
Yeah.
I mean, think about post-war Europe
Oh, right, yeah.
or other periods of mass migration.
Yeah.
It's this recurring theme.
It is.
Right.
So these temporary camps, as you can imagine, presented a whole new set of challenges.
Of course.
Liat's newsletter delves into the conditions, the struggles, the impact on families just like hers.
Yeah.
This is a side of history we don't often hear about.
We don't.
Right.
And this is where Liat's father's story starts to intersect with the broader narrative.
Okay.
You know, imagine the responsibility he must have felt.
Yeah.
Coming from this stable background.
Right.
Suddenly having to rebuild, provide for his family.
Right.
In this completely new and challenging environment.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's an incredible story.
It is.
And we're just getting started.
I know. I'm excited to hear more.
Next, we'll uncover what came after the Ma'abaro and how those decisions played out in the lives of everyday people.
Okay, yeah. So as the Ma'abaro, they proved unsustainable, right, long term.
Right.
The Israeli government, they embarked on this massive public housing project.
Right.
And on the surface, this seemed like the logical next step, right?
Yeah.
A move towards permanency and stability.
Right. It makes sense.
Yeah.
You've got to transition from those temporary shelters to something more permanent.
Right.
But as we often see with these large-scale solutions,
Yeah.
what seems like a good idea in theory...
yeah, it gets a little more complicated.
It does, yeah. Liat's newsletter highlights some of those unintended consequences.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
These housing projects, while well-intentioned, often resulted in concentrated poverty, limited social mobility, and, unfortunately, sometimes even increased crime rates.
Yeah. It's a pattern we see globally.
It is. It's not just in Israel.
Not just in Israel.
Right.
Liat's family, they experienced this firsthand.
Right.
They moved from the Ma'abara to a cramped apartment. But the poverty and struggle persisted.
Right.
Her newsletter also touches on the discrimination faced by North African immigrants, which only compounded these challenges.
And this raises important questions about the effectiveness of just like providing housing without addressing the social and economic factors at play.
Totally.
How can we create communities that offer genuine opportunity and upward mobility?
And that's a great question. And that's where Liat's father's story takes this fascinating turn. He becomes an architect.
Wow.
Working on the very same public housing projects his family lived in.
It's almost poetic.
It is.
Here's someone who experienced the realities of these projects firsthand.
Right.
And now he's in a position to potentially influence their design and their impact.
It's incredible, right?
It really is, yeah.
It really is incredible. You're right.
Yeah.
To think that he went from living in these projects to designing them.
Yeah.
It's quite a story.
It makes you think about the limitations, right, of focusing just on the physical structures.
Right.
Without addressing those deeper societal issues.
Yeah. And Liat's newsletter touches on that, how her father grappled with this.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is Liat's father, now an architect, he wasn't alone in recognizing these flaws.
Right.
Think about the broader context.
Yeah.
This was a period of intense reflection on urban planning globally.
Oh, yeah.
Architects, sociologists, they were all asking these tough questions
Right.
about how to create truly successful communities.
It's so easy to look back and kind of critique those past approaches.
Right.
But Liat presents her father's story with a sense of understanding, I think, for the complexities of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was this massive housing shortage,
Of course.
limited resources, and a real desire to provide for these new citizens.
And that's what makes Liat's newsletter so compelling.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the challenges. The unintended consequences.
Right.
It uses those experiences, those personal stories to ask, like, what can we learn?
Exactly. And it's a theme that resonates, I think,
Totally.
far beyond architecture and urban planning.
Yeah.
How often do we see well-intentioned decisions have these ripple effects
Right.
that we couldn't have anticipated?
Absolutely. And it underscores the need for constant reflection, right? Considering those diverse perspectives, learning from the past.
Thinking about those long-term impacts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that brings us to, I think, a crucial question here. If simply building more housing isn't the answer, what is?
Right.
And Liat's newsletter explores this by delving deeper into her father's story.
What did he learn from his experiences working on those very projects?
Exactly.
What lessons did he carry with him throughout his career?
And Liat digs into those questions and more as she uncovers her father's evolving perspective, I think, on architecture and its role in shaping communities.
This is where her work goes beyond just recounting history.
Yes.
She connects those experiences to the broader conversation about social responsibility.
Totally.
About the power and the limitations of design.
It makes you consider the legacy we're creating today, right?
Right, yeah.
The decisions that we're making that will impact generations to come, whether it's urban planning, technology, any field.
Right.
That awareness of long-term consequences feels more relevant than ever.
It's a reminder that we're not just building structures or systems, right?
Right.
We're shaping lives and communities.
Yeah.
And those choices, those designs, they have a lasting impact.
They do. Well said. And now, shifting gears slightly.
Okay.
Let's talk about how Liat herself approaches this topic.
Right.
Her newsletter stands out, not just for the content, but for her unique style and perspective.
Right.
It's that personal touch that really sets Liat's newsletter apart.
Yeah.
She doesn't just present, dry facts or these abstract theories. She invites you into her family's story.
Yeah.
You experience those early days in the Morocco.
It's powerful.
Move to public housing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, her father's journey as an architect through his eyes.
It's that emotional connection that makes the history come alive.
It does.
You're not just reading about policies.
Right.
You're feeling their impact on individuals and families.
It makes it real.
Exactly. And that makes those lessons about urban planning, about social responsibility, so much more powerful.
Absolutely. And Liat's writing is incredibly engaging. She seamlessly weaves together this historical context, these personal anecdotes, and then these bigger picture reflections in a way that's both informative and thought-provoking.
It's clear she's incredibly skilled at, distilling complex ideas into a format that's accessible.
Right.
But not, simplistic.
Right. It's not dumbed down.
Exactly.
Yeah. You walk away with a deeper understanding of the challenges, the successes, and the ongoing evolution, I think, of urban planning.
Yeah.
Particularly in the Israeli context.
It's a really unique perspective.
It is. So to wrap things up,
okay,
for our listeners who are intrigued by what we've discussed today, interested in history, architecture, or just compelling storytelling, what would you say is the key takeaway here?
I think for me, it's the reminder that the decisions we make, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as housing, they have this ripple effect.
They do.
They shape lives for generations to come.
And Liat's father's story is a perfect example of that.
It really is.
Yeah.
His journey from living in those early housing projects to designing them really highlights the importance of lived experience. Understanding the human impact of our choices.
Well said. And on that note, we've just scratched the surface of the insights that Liat's newsletter offers.
We have. There's so much more there.
It's called The Liat Show, and it's free to subscribe to on Substack.
You can also find the podcast version on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Oh, that's right.
If you're someone who likes to listen on the go.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
Liat consistently delivers these thought-provoking deep dives.
She does.
Into history, architecture, and the human experience.
And it leaves you with that lingering question. What will future generations say about the choices we're making today?
It really makes you think.
It does. What will be our legacy in brick and mortar?
Right.
That's something to ponder as we navigate, I think, the complexities of housing, urban development, and creating thriving communities in the 21st century.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you on the next one.